Showtime! The Capital G Show starts right now.
What's up YouTube, Capital G here, doing a video talking about how times have changed in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! And how a lot of cards that were widely considered to be basically staple status are practically obsolete in this format. And I don't necessarily think it's because of the cards themselves have just gotten bad. I think that a lot of it has to do with the speed of the game and just the matchups. Like people have said, it's always about matchups similar to boxing, and there are two cards in particular that I want to talk about in this video. Number one being Dark Hole, and the second card being Mystical Space Typhoon. Okay, so let's start with Dark Hole. Dark Hole is a card that a lot of people have been dropping from their decks. Quite frankly, if I was running a deck right now, I personally wouldn't run it because I look at the top decks of the format and I don't really think that it's that effective against any of them. You look at the Dragon Ruler matchup, it's practically useless because first off, if they open up with the most common play that the deck is probably going to want to do going first, the Dragossack play, I mean, yeah, you'll kill the tokens, but Dragossack won't die, and that's something that you guys told me. So you still have to deal with a 2600 beater, which is, I mean, that's not like the easiest task in the world. Now, obviously, this is pretty much insurmountable if your opponent has the Light and Darkness to go along with the Dragossack. Your Dark Hole is just completely null and void. You look at it against Evilswarm and Prophecy. Okay, so it's not really that effective here because both of those decks have quick plays that can protect their key monsters, their boss monsters. Whatever cards that they have on the field that you are threatening with Dark Hole, those cards are going to protect them. And unlike Forbidden Lance, you know, those monsters don't lose, you know, any attack. So it's not like it's going to be easier to get over those monsters when they play their quick play. By the way, both of those quick play cards, you know, Spellbook of Wisdom or the Infestation Pandemic, they're both searchable. So it's not like, you know, it's going to be difficult for them to get those cards because, you know, decks usually run multiples. They can get to the cards whenever they want. Now, I will say this, it's effective against Mermail. The only problem is when it's effective. Like, it's really good against Mermail after they have basically spammed the field. You know what I mean? But when they spam the field and they're dropping Moving Glaciers and Titles and, you know, they summon the Marksman, which is going to probably get them another monster as long as they do damage, most of the time they're going for game. So it's like you can have that Dark Hole and they can have all these monsters on the board and you're like, wow, I'm going to get a ton of advantage. You have to actually live through that to actually be able to use that Dark Hole. And a lot of times when they're putting all those cards on board, if they're summoning things like Moulin Glacier or Abyss Megalo, they're making advantage at the same time. I mean, they're searching other cards and, you know, Marksman is summoning other things from the deck and all this other stuff. So, you know, it's good against Mermail if you actually get to survive and use it. Now, against rogue decks, which is something that you might not want to consider, you know, in your decision to make to main deck Dark Hole, because I'm not really sure how much of the format right now is really the rogue decks. I feel like it's completely hit or miss. I mean, yeah, if you play against a gadget deck like, you know, what Robbie Cole ran, okay, you can probably get an easy 1-for-1, maybe 2-for-1. So it's really good there, except what happens when you run into Infernity or Karakuri? I mean, these decks that just super spam the field, and then they make these huge lockdown fields of, you know, three Infernity barriers plus like Doom Dragon and Void Ogre. Obviously, your Dark Hole is not doing shit there. Or you play against Karakuri, as Desmond Johnson just for some reason will never give up, and he always seems to make that trend come back to life. You know, Karakuri is a deck that easily goes, you know, double Bureido plus an Eteria Beast, or double Bureido, a Beret, and Stardust Dragon, or something like that. So it's like, alright, well, your Stardust or your Dark Hole may not be really good against that matchup either. I just look at Dark Hole and I think it's good against such a minimal part of what we're seeing right now. I don't really think that, you know, it's anywhere near staple status. The second card I want to talk about is Mystical Space Typhoon. I mean, practically the definition of a staple. One of my favorite cards ever to be printed in this game. I mean, hell, there were large portions of time where you were just considered crazy if you didn't run 3 MSTs in the main deck, and now it's like the card is just falling off the end of the earth. I mean, once again, we'll look at the top 4 decks and see how it breaks down. It's completely dead against Dragon Rulers. I mean, most versions run like 4 or less traps, so you can go entire games without seeing a single target to MST. Even if you do happen to, you know, MST the one card that they actually set, there's at least a decent good chance that it's something like breakthrough skill, meaning they can still get some utility out of that card. All they have to do is just wait until their turn. Against Evilswarm, I really don't think that it's effective in that matchup. I mean, this is a deck that basically always wants to have 3 to 4 cards in its back row, so you're probably going to be reduced to blind MSTing, which I personally believe is awful in general, but it's made even worse if you happen to hit the Pandemic Infestation, because that's a chainable card. It's going to give their field blanket protection, so I really don't think that it's good there. Against Prophecy, it's like shooting a tank with a slingshot. I mean, the only reason that that deck even sets cards in their back row face down is because they got so many cards from Spellbook of Judgment, they just don't want to discard things. So anything that you MST, I mean, half the time they're just duplicates of other cards that they have in their hand anyway. Everything in the entire deck, as far as the spells go, they're all, you know, recyclable, and they run multiple copies of all those cards anyway, so you're not really doing any damage to them. And, you know, the deck does run a couple of traps. A lot of people run Wabaku, which is chainable too, so you never want to hit that. Now, it's still effective against Mermail, because if they set a card in their back row, you can bet that it's probably Abyss Spear. You know, a lot of versions have dropped, like, you know, Abyss Squall and stuff like that, so, you know, hitting an Abyss Spear is still one of their key cards. You can obviously just wait for them to activate it and then chain it, but I feel like, you know, against the top 4 decks, it's really not that strong right now. And you look at the rogue matchups with decks like Dark World and Fire Fist no longer being, you know, that highly played decks, you know, especially Fire Fist. That deck is basically MIA, and it's one of those high tier decks where MST was always live against that deck. I mean, if you wanted to get your double summon play off and you needed a 10-cent, you could MST that. If your opponent, you know, obviously was looking to search for a card with the 10 key, you could just MST that. Dark World, another deck where, you know, chances are, at least within the first 2 turns, they were almost always looking to get gates off or something like that. So with field spells, not really seeing much play outside of the Spellbook Tower, which they don't really need to win, to be honest. And Fire Fist no longer being a top contender, I just feel like MST has lost a lot of its luster, and I really don't think that it's like main deck worthy anymore. I mean, the only deck that, you know, would probably have a good reason to run it would be a deck like Evilswarm, so that they don't run in the back row, but they've got Infestation Pandemic, which is like a better version of the card, and it's searchable, so they get a lot more utility out of cards like that and cards like Forbidden Dress and Safe Zone than they ever would out of a card like MST. So let me know what you guys think of these 2 cards that I don't really consider that great in this format right now. Maybe they will be in future formats when things change. Thank you guys for watching, and take it easy. Subscribing makes life happy.